and welcome to this edition of Kernels. I'm Maryann Mori. I'm the District Consultant for Central District of the State Library, and with me today is Stacy Goodhue, who is the Director of the Carlisle Public Library, located in Warren County here in Iowa. Kernels is an ongoing series of short videos from the State Library of Iowa. Each installment is a small pop of professional development that gets right to the core of a library program, service, or library methodology applied in a public library setting. Kernels feature in-practice librarians such as Stacy discussing their work so that other in-practice librarians can learn from their experiences. Kernels are posted to the State Library of Iowa's Continuing Education YouTube channel, and there's a whole playlist of them, so check them out. They are also cross-posted to Iowa Learns, our learning management system, so Iowa librarians can watch them there for CE credit. Just watch the video and complete the evaluation. Check out the description of this video or the attachments area of Iowa Learns for links to resources and any handouts that may be included with some of the Kernels issues. So Stacy Goodhue, as I said, is the Director of Carlisle Public Library, and she is here to talk about a really interesting community event that included a lot of partnerships and benefited a lot of people. Stacy, what did you do?
We were very excited to spearhead a drive-through COVID vaccine clinic, and we were able to vaccinate almost 90 people within 2 hours.
Wow, that's like a Guinness Book of World Records kind of thing to do.
It felt like it. Yes.
And what's the library? Did you do this in your library or what?
So we actually have been partnering with our local Medicap for about a month now. They contacted us to help seniors sign up for their appointments for anybody who did not have access to internet or didn't have an email, needed some help with some of that. And as we know, those appointments were going so fast. Librarians were the perfect fit to be able to fill out those online forms for them. So, but when I was discussing with our pharmacist that now we were at the second dose for these individuals, and there were about 90, she only had one day to just administer them, and she didn't know what she was going to do. She was just going to have to, she's only a one person, pharmacy with techs. She was going to have to just make appointments every 5 minutes for the entire day to get through all of them. There isn't the logistical space over at the pharmacy to handle that many people coming and going. We have the benefit here of that our library is right behind us is the fire station, and I've seen them do drive-through pancake breakfasts for fundraisers.
And
I said,
concept too.
And that is, yes. I said, if they can do a drive-through pancake breakfast, why can't we do a drive-through clinic?
Fantastic. Well, we have some slides, so let me pull those up just a second here. Okay, so this first slide is a screenshot from the Warren County Health Services Facebook page, and I love this. Did you hear about the amazing drive-through COVID vaccine clinic in Carlisle that happened on March 1st? Now, it doesn't specifically mention the library, but this it does link to a news article that I have a screenshot of later here in our slides. But I think this is great that the Warren County Health Services picked up on this. Did you notify them about this, or they are?
I didn't. I don't know if our pharmacy did. I know that she's in contact with them a lot. We did have the benefit of having some press that came. 2 local newspapers as well as a TV station. So we did get quite a little bit of press for it. It was a big community effort as far as community or city departments. So maybe the library got a little more recognition from some sources than others, but the word did get out.
Nice. And we have some pictures here as well. If I can get my slides to advance here. Here we go. So tell us about these pictures we're seeing here.
So what you're seeing right there is we had police do traffic control. So you're seeing one of the streets before they would turn left and actually line up to get their shot. So these are my staff members who are going from car to car, and they are helping to verify IDs of these participants to make sure that these are people who are actually should be there to get their shots.
Okay.
And as they turned the corner, once we had verified their identity, they could pull forward. You've got two pharmacists here. We were lucky to have our pharmacist, Pam, her supervisor came. So we were able to have two pharmacists. We would just pull one car up and then we would pull another one. They would get their shot and then they would pull forward. We ended up having 4 stations: a check-in station, receiving their shots, receiving their paperwork or their little card, their sticker on that, and then they went up to the EMTs to be watched to make sure there was no
yeah, and this is a map that might help clarify how this works. So down here in the red circle, that's where your library is located, on the corner of School and 2nd Street. And then right behind you, just north of you, is the fire station.
Right.
You're on the other corner of 2nd Street and Main Street. So you filed traffic.
We double stacked them. So we basically closed down just this corridor and allowed 2 cars side by side because then they could pull in one after another.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's important to note that we were lucky to have the fire station right behind us. And I had seen them do something similar before, but that doesn't mean that it had to be done here. If the school was not in session and we had a really big parking lot at our disposal, we could have definitely done it there. It made sense to do it here as we had the most city halls real close by. So we had a lot of people just be able to come over and help, but it didn't have to be here. It just worked out that way. Maybe
a park setting could work,
absolutely.
Drive through the park.
Yeah.
So, but that you said that you had 4 stations. Were those located on these 2 streets that we see highlighted here?
Yep, absolutely. So the second arrow, so right above the dot that says Carlisle, said Carlisle Fire Station, that's where 2 of my staff were checking IDs.
Okay.
As soon as they turned left is basically where the other 3 stations were, almost where you got that. We were able to stack them in a manner of, once a car left, you pulled forward. So there was always some movement. The EMTs were kind of keeping track along with the citizens to kind of keep track of 15 minutes. And of course, we can't enforce them to wait for 15 minutes, but most of them did.
And so that kind of leads to another question. How long did it take for each car to progress through? And then you said they had to wait 15 minutes afterwards, but just the progression to get to that waiting station.
Oh, the progression maybe from start to finish was 3 minutes, maybe, until you got to where you needed to wait for the EMTs. She had multiple appointments so that hopefully we could stack them correctly. So people wouldn't all show up right at 11 o'clock. We held it from 11 to 1 on a Monday. But they still
2
did
hours
stuff.
Time. You got all 90 people done in 2 hours time.
Yes.
Wow. That's incredible. So I just wanted to point this out, and I hope people can see the writing on the slide. Sometimes the Zoom camera doesn't cooperate. Your library is not huge.
No.
You are in a size D as far as population, but your library is small. It's not like you have a tremendous amount of staff readily available or large spaces anywhere. How many of your staffers were involved in doing this?
So we have 3 full-time and we do have a couple of part-time. So I closed the library for this, decided we were going to open late. So I had 4 staff members, including myself, that did help. And then we had the police chief was helping with traffic control, the 2 pharmacists, the mayor decided to put the stickers on the cards. I had then there were 3 EMTs. We ended up total having a lot of extra people, but so we had about 13 people that helped. I really think it could have been done well with 7 or 8. I don't think we needed that many people.
It's good to know. And it looks like the weather cooperated fairly well. I think it was a little chilly that day, as I recall, but it wasn't unbearable, right?
No, it was a little chilly, but it was the sun was out and people were happy, and we were all moving so fast that the cold didn't get to us too bad. In one of the pictures, you'll see me with my gloves on because I'm in charge of moving all the paperwork, and I was so cold. My fingers were cold, but the rest of, we were busy.
And this, I think this is the fire station that they're lined up in front of here.
Exactly. My library is further up. You can't see it right there, but you can see people getting ready to get their shots in that black car, and then they are pulling forward. Over on the right hand side, you can see them starting to stack up. There, that's me with the gloves. I was so cold. Okay. So what we did is Medicap was able to print out the sheets of every single person that was receiving a shot. So anybody who came through and we didn't have a corresponding sheet for them, they were not able to get their vaccine. So these were appointment made, drive-through appointments. Once my staff member who's standing there brought me the ID, I would find the corresponding sheet that says, yes, this person should be here. And then that sheet and the ID went back to the driver. What was on the sheet was their appointment time, but also any identification of allergies or something like that that the pharmacist would need to know. And so when she was able to take that directly from that, from that patient or whatever, then we've completed that circle.
So question arises, how did this all tie in with the privacy aspects, HIPAA and such?
So our pharmacist asked that the librarians be in charge of paperwork and doing identification. So any other volunteers that we had, it was all kept just with librarians. One, because we have helped many of these people already sign up online. So we had already, spoken to them, already knew who they were. Two, a lot of them were our seniors that come into the library. So we were familiar with them. But then we already have, an oath to keep confidentiality in the library for our patrons. Right. And she felt very comfortable that librarians were going to be able to handle that in a professional manner. So really, there was not a whole lot of extra information on there besides their name and their address and their Medicare number. But we discussed that and we decided we felt comfortable enough with keeping it within just the library staff.
And library staff, as you said, already being trained about the ethics of privacy and confidentiality.
Exactly.
And all the baskets and things, is this actually the vaccination station then?
This is the vaccination station. So we had an emergency kit, we had gloves, they changed gloves for every single patient. They had the actual vaccine that they had prepared. So we had 90 syringes ready. And then we had open Band-Aids, or not open, but ready to open Band-Aids and the alcohol wipes that they needed.
And just to clarify, your library staff didn't do anything with the vaccination. You were just handling the check-in and the paperwork. You had the registered pharmacists and their employees were the ones doing the vaccinating.
Exactly. They were the ones that received the vaccine at their pharmacy. They knew what they had available and how many. We helped some of those people get signed up for an appointment time, but that was still all done through the Medicap pharmacy website. So we weren't in charge of any of that.
Okay. This is a really good news article that was featured in the Indianola newspaper that had excellent coverage about this event. You can see the headline there, community partnership delivers second dose vaccines in Carlisle. And this really was a community partnership. I just put a screenshot here of part of the article, and there's a URL at the bottom that our viewers can access this to read it because it's a very good article. But I like that this, of course, I like that it quotes the librarian so much on here. But you mentioned, you're quoted here by saying we, meaning you and the pharmacist, we realized with the sheer amount of people that the pharmacist needed to vaccine, there was no way we could get them inside the doors of Medicap. And 3 days later, you had this full-fledged drive-through vaccination clinic. You planned this in about 2 days, right? And the third day you did.
Right. It was a Friday afternoon, or Friday morning, really. We didn't really speak over the weekend, and then Monday we did it.
Wow. That really is amazing how quickly you were able to coordinate this.
It quickly came together for a couple of reasons. I was able to call our fire chief right away and say, do you have EMTs available? And once I knew he was on board and the pharmacist was on board, I knew the rest we could get either volunteers or more city people to help. Really, I needed to make sure I had trained medical personnel there to help in the case of any sort of adverse reaction. I was very grateful that others showed up. But I think it was key that I was able to just quickly make phone calls and came up with those stations, and that's what worked.
And the article goes on to talk about those partnerships that I have listed there in the other box, but the article says city officials were all chipping in. The police department handled traffic. Goodhue and her library staff were managing the check-in process. The city administrator was aiding the pharmacist by opening Band-Aid packets. There was a councilman counting vaccines that had been administered. The mayor, as you said, was adhering the stickers to vaccination cards, and the city's fire department and EMT staff watched over patients for reactions. So it was such a good collaboration. You're quoted in the article by saying that the goal was that if that day worked well, then you could continue and do it again when you have more doses to hand out. Do you have plans to repeat this?
We do. I think in a couple of weeks, we will have enough people that have been vaccinated for the first time that need to have another clinic for their second doses. So we for sure will be doing another one for second doses. And we're working through logistics right now to figure out how we can do it for first doses, a little bit more logistical pieces. And also people have a lot more questions when they first receive their vaccine. And we want to make sure everyone is comfortable and we're not shuffling them through. I also want to find a way to do it so that the library can stay open and that we can maybe get more volunteers. And maybe that's from my library board to see how we can still keep what we need to do or enough people to help with the clinic, but still not take away from city resources.
And I'm assuming the public's response to this was good. They were great.
Absolutely. My staff and I are so excited that we were able to, that people are getting this vaccine. So it almost felt like a party atmosphere. We were cheering for them and clapping for them. And it was, all over Facebook, and the overwhelming response has been so positive and so thankful that we were able to help not only with this clinic, but that we were able to help our seniors, which is such a vulnerable population.
Did the people going through the drive-through, did they realize that it was library staff that was helping them?
Oh, yeah.
So how did they know?
Well, we had kept our name tags on as much as we could. It was cold, but we recognize them. They're our patrons. They're people we know from our community. I've lived here for 10 years, so these are faces of people that we know.
And that's all of our slides. Just a few other questions. One question I'm not sure we clarified was, how did the people know that they were supposed to come to this event?
Right, and this made it easier since it was a second dose. They had already received information emailed back to them, or if they didn't have email, the pharmacy was calling them. Okay. So they received clear information, go to this link, sign up for your time within this window, and then come to the fire station, come to the library. And so they knew by receiving a phone call for those without email, or receiving an email of directly where to come. Okay. We were a little bit hesitant about putting anything about on Facebook or even making big signs, because we didn't want to have a big sign, this is vaccine clinic, and people try to come that it wasn't their turn, right? So we made signs, but they just said Medicap and with arrows. And I think everyone knew they were getting this vaccine through Medi-Cap. So it made sense for them to just use the directional arrows that way.
That makes sense. You mentioned early on that you kind of got the idea for this from having previously seen the fire department do a drive-through pancake breakfast. And that kind of makes me wonder, well, maybe a library doesn't have a pharmacy in town and they don't have the opportunity to have a drive-through clinic, but whoa, that pancake breakfast could be a good fundraiser for their friends group.
Sure.
How did that work?
So they always do a pancake breakfast every year, but this year they couldn't have it at the fire station. So they had a drive-through one and they had signs everywhere for it. Other organizations around town have done like a spaghetti dinner, or we had a couple of restaurants in town who partnered with those who were having a little bit of trouble of getting by, and they gave out free dinners to those low-income families. So and that was just a drive-through right up to their restaurant.
It was just a matter basically of traffic control, having good signage, getting the notices out, and people would drive up and pay for their pancakes and get handed.
Yeah, and again, it was just stations, I believe. Here's where you give your money to. Here's where you get your platter of food. Here's where they'll hand you a cup of coffee if you want it, and off you go. And if you think about it, our curbside isn't all that different if you've got multiple cars doing curbside.
Right. What would you have done differently if you were going to do this the next time? What would you advise somebody, who's considering doing this? Do you have any good tips or?
Right. So I think in our case, we were dealing with, and maybe it isn't just seniors, maybe just everyone is very, very excited about getting this vaccine. And so we had people show up an hour before we were ready to open. So I think being prepared to either start early or to know where to direct them, because we didn't even have one of the streets blocked off, and we had cars come. So we happened to be ready to go. So we just started. But yeah, so I think, and I think that if we hadn't anticipated that we would have to double stack cars. I think we thought that 15 minutes moved a little bit faster in our heads than it does in real time. So we didn't have too much of a backup, but we did have ending up double stack of cars, and we hadn't anticipated that. So I think it would have been helpful to have cones on both sides of the street, and we just had cones on one side.
Okay. Well, what advice would you give to a librarian who wants to do this, who wants to try to replicate it? What should they do first?
I think it's phone calls. I think it is taking that time to reach out to your pharmacist. You've got to start with your pharmacist. If you don't have a pharmacy, call your clinic. They may be getting large doses, number of doses, or they may say, we can't handle that many because we can't handle the workflow of it. And so if you are able to reach out and say, I've got this idea, it has to all start with them to be willing to do that. And then it's calling your city departments. It was critical to have the EMTs there and to have the pharmacist. And it was awesome to have the rest of them be part of it. But I think we could have also done it with some other volunteers as well.
I know in a lot of our smaller communities, they don't have a pharmacy, they don't have a clinic, but I'm pretty sure that every county has a health department. So for those of you that are viewing this and you don't have the pharmacy, you don't have the clinic, and you're going, well, what can I do? Contact your county health department and say, I've got this great idea. Is there a way that we could help sponsor this, help get this event in our town, where it may be hard if you do have seniors in your town that can't drive a distance to wherever the nearest pharmacy or clinic is. Bring the vaccine to the people and let the library help coordinate that. That would probably be my recommendation, is to call your county health department as a first step.
Absolutely. I think that they've been very willing to help with any questions that we have along the way. Warren County has been, and I know that, especially when we've got communities that are far away from your county seat where your health department's going to be, we need to be able to get the vaccine out to the people, and that might be the way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was a wonderful event. It was a good service that the library did, and it's good that you got some coverage. And I know you didn't do this just to your own horn or to get people to say, oh, kudos to the library, but I'm curious, how did your city respond to your idea? Obviously they were supportive because some of them participated, council members and your mayor and such, but have they said something like, wow, our library really is important to our town?
Yeah, it's interesting because our mayor is definitely has struggled with understanding how libraries have changed over the years, and he has the impression of what a library should have been like based on what he was when he was a child. But he stopped me actually after we were done with the clinic and said how proud he was of the library and how grateful he was that we were here to help the community in such a way, and that it was really starting to open his eyes. So
Right.
I think it's really positive. I know at the city council meeting last night, they also gave the library a shout out for helping, and yeah, so I think it's definitely helped in a big way.
Good. One other question I thought of is, how did you get your staff on board with this? Was there any hesitancy on their part, or they jumped at it, or how did that all happen?
They jumped at it. They've been very, very excited to help from the very beginning. I think if they were, if we were doing this when they were not working, if it was a weekend or something like that, they'd come and volunteer. I mean, they are just that passionate about being able to get the vaccine to everybody, because they recognize that we'll be able to get that much closer to normal once our community gets vaccinated. But I did also say that it was their choice. I wasn't going to force them to do that if that's something they felt strongly against, and everybody was on board.
What about your library board? Did you talk with them before you did this, and were they okay with closing the library, and what was how did that all coincide? And
so I had to send an email quickly. I sent a text to my library board president, and then I sent an email out to everybody, and I just said, this is a decision I've made. I hope that everybody is on board with it, but I'm going to close the library for this amount of time. Had I had more time, this was very time sensitive because of when the vaccine needed to get used, based on that 80% percentage that has to get out the door within each week, right? So it was more time sensitive, and had I had more time, I would have probably made phone calls and made sure I heard back from a majority of the board. But as it was,
it at a board meeting, or
exactly, yeah, as it is, I
made an executive decision.
I made an executive decision, and I knew if I had to ask forgiveness later, I guess that I would. But it's been very positive. They're very excited that this went as well as it did, and they're excited for us to try to do it again in the future. So,
yeah. Any last thoughts or words of encouragement, advice?
Yeah, I think that if anybody has questions of how they might do this in their own community, feel free to reach out to me. I know that my pharmacist, if she were not so busy putting in shots for people, she would be definitely willing to talk to any other pharmacist as well. She's a wonderful person. So Medicap in Carlisle, I know that she'd be willing to talk through if a community partner needed to kind of get some assurance beyond the library. But feel free to have people contact me and just reach out, and we can brainstorm.
One other thought that some of our viewers might have, you mentioned that you had previously, or the library, your staff, had been helping some of your residents get appointments for their first vaccination, and how critical that is, because I have heard reports, as many people probably have also heard, that it's very difficult, particularly for people who aren't tech savvy, to be able to get appointments. How did you do that? Were you doing this by phone? Did the people come into the library? Tell us a little bit about that.
We had both, but mostly it was by phone. I was lucky enough to get a heads up from our pharmacist. So I would say, okay, guys, we're about to get some phone calls, because once she would open up the portal or whatever it was on the website, things would move very quickly and word would spread. But I did have people that just called every day, because I was not going to be responsible for creating a list and sticking to that. That was not a decision that I wanted us to, I didn't want to have to be responsible for. So we had people that just had to call every day until the portal was open for us to try to make an appointment.
And had your pharmacist told people that, hey, the library staff can help you if you need assistance?
Yes. So she has a phone message when you call the local Medi-Cap. It's kind of, please pay close attention. We are now vaccinating, blah, blah, blah. And she gives the whole spiel, but she does say, if you need help or you do not have access to email, then she does say to contact us.
Oh, so that was already a good partnership.
Yeah. And I would recommend, even if that's the least that you could do, if you've got the staff to be able to handle more phone calls, because, just as everybody else, like we're open, but our circulation and our numbers are still down, as it is all over. So if people are able to help with taking those phone calls, that's a big start.
And how difficult was it for your staff to learn how to maneuver the site to get those?
It's basically a Google form that Medi-Cap uses, or a version of, so it was not hard for any of my staff to be able to just, put it all in quickly. It's just a matter of we can type faster than a lot of people.
Well, congratulations on a very successful and impactful event. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your information. When you told me about it, and then I did have you come to the office hours here in Central District to talk about it to the librarians at that event, I thought this is too good to just keep here in our little circle. We need to let everybody know about this, because it's a wonderful opportunity for libraries to, as you pointed out, to let people such as your mayor know that libraries are so much more than just books.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you to those of you who are watching, taking the time to be here and hear Stacy's story. And if you replicate this, please let us know at the State Library. We'd love to hear about it. If you're watching this on YouTube, please check out the links in the description for more information. We'll have Stacy's contact information there. In Iowa Learns, these are usually stored as attachments, but if you've got a little bit of time, consider watching another one of the kernels that we have offered. We have several now and more in the making. If you're doing something at your library, a program, an initiative, a service, or something else that you think would make a great kernel, we want to hear about it. So reach out to your district consultant and tell us about it so we can schedule a time that you can share your story as well. Thank you again, Stacy, and thank you for watching.